love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to SDA Q&A. My special guest is Ray. Is it Doherty? Is that
Doherty?
Doherty. Ray Doherty. It sounds a little bit Celtic in a way, but
very.
Right. Is it Scottish or Irish background?
It's an old Irish. Well, it's an anglicized Irish name.
Yeah, from the north. Welcome, Ray. Good to have you on the program. We're going to be having a fantastic conversation today. Adventism is law theology. And everyone, welcome. We're going to be listening to Ray a lawyer who found his way out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I can just see in the comments, it's Rochelle Anonymous's birthday. Hey, Rochelle, happy birthday to you from all of us. And it's good to see that she is getting some love in the chat. And it's good to see. Rochelle also asks if book club is on this Friday, Thursday your time. This week, that'll be Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Sorry, 8 p.m. Pacific for book club. I'm hoping so, Rochelle. We will confirm that very soon, but I hope so. I'm not sure if you know, Ray, but every week or so we have book club after our Good News Fellowship, which is Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. So it's a fun gathering. This at the moment we're reading Whitewashed, which is by Sidney Cleveland, who I'd love to have on the show one day if you know how to get in touch with him. Also tomorrow, there's 3 options for tomorrow. I may be doing, look what I've got. I may be doing a program on this book, Reclaiming the Prophet. It got banned within about 6 days, Ray. The progressives were putting their hand up saying, hey, let's try and make a little bit more ground. And it's a great read. All the scholars and academics got together and wrote this book, Reclaiming the Prophet, An Honest Defense of Ellen White's Gift. And as I've often said, Ray, when progressive Adventists put their hand up and say, this is my Adventism, and declare it, cookie cutter comes down and cuts them back into shape. And cutting them into shape in this one was banning this book. But they're pretty positive, as they always are, which is good to see. And they feel that, it's just a glitch, and that once Erton Kohler is in power, he will allow it to be re-released. Good luck with that one. But so 3 possibilities for tomorrow. I'll be doing a bit of a look at that book, or we may have Alexander Carpenter on chatting about the week that was, the GC. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to watch one of our Des Ford Season 2 episodes, a rewatch. So there we go. Here we are. And one more time, welcome. So Ray Doherty, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a lawyer. You've been on the show once before. I think it was on Mike Colburn when I was interviewing him, and you came on at some point, and I thought, wow, we've got to get this guy on the show to share his story, and it's taken us this long to make it happen. So, Ray.
Well, it's been a busy season for both of us, so it's all good. I'm glad to be back. Thank you so much. Well, as you said, I'm an attorney. I live in Nebraska now. I'm originally from Michigan. Grew up most of my life there. Spent some time in Minnesota growing up. Was born into the SDA church. Both of my parents' families converted in. They didn't know each other at the time, but they converted in almost the same year, maybe within 2 years of each other. Growing up in Michigan, of course, it's the antithesis of a progressive Adventist environment. In some ways, maybe my family was seen as more liberal than maybe some of the people we went to church with, but also more conservative than others. I would describe us as maybe conservative-leaning Adventists, but also not necessarily in every way. I grew up, of course, being a vegetarian, as many Adventists do. Never intentionally ate meat until I was in college, probably around age 22. SDA schools all the way through. I should say SDA grade school for 4 years, and then homeschool. It counts. And then bounced a little bit between homeschool and church schools again, finishing out high school at Great Lakes Adventist Academy in Michigan in 2010. When I was a senior at the academy there, I came and visited Union College, now Union Adventist University here in Lincoln. Really loved it. It's a very friendly place, still is. And I came out here and I loved it, and I wanted to go to school here. So I did. I came out here, I studied history. I was here for 5.5 years. I took a year off in there, so it isn't quite as long as that, but worked for the college, worked summer camps like we talked about last time. I worked Camp Asable in Michigan for several summers, including the now infamous end time scenario.
Which is why we had you on the show that time.
It's just being on the show last time brought back so many different memories from that summer, and how different a perspective it is, and it must be, looking on the outside, looking back, but having been there and knowing what was going on outside with the backlash was just an interesting experience.
Just a quick recap there for those watching who may not have seen that program. We're talking about, I think, 2011 it may have happened, and there was big reenactments of end time events, and there were guns involved in the photo promo shoots and whatnot. And you were able to verify that, yes, it did happen, because some people were trying to say it didn't. And the reality is it's something that has happened at summer camps, in the Adventist church, in Sabbath school meetings for decades. This reenactment of, you had better be ready or it's going to be like this without the gun. And in one case there in the promo pic, there was guns pointed at the kids' heads. So
yeah, I mean, it's, again, just a little recap. It did happen, but also it's not necessarily what everybody thinks. Yes, it was bad.
Yes.
But the pictures that came out with like people on their hands and knees with their or heads, you know what I mean, on their knees with their hands behind their head.
Yeah.
Those were all staff. None of the campers did that, to my recollection.
Yeah. No, that just seemed to be promo shots that may or may not have been taken on the during the program or not. I don't know, but at least we know there was reenactments. Fear was drilled into the kids.
Oh, absolutely.
Sunday law has passed. You got to decide. Otherwise, there's going to be terrible ramifications.
Yeah, and I mean, not to spend too much time on this, but it was structured in such a way that the kids were going into the auditorium for what appeared to be just a normal program for the week. And then suddenly you hear the program director's voice, breaking news, the remnant is now the enemy, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Run around to all these stations. And some of the kids were like, whatever. But a lot of them were definitely really scared. And it's unfortunate that took place. Fortunately, they pivoted away from it.
I've shared my story about that, my experience, which would have been somewhere between 79 to 1983. It was happening back then in real time. Fear was used. Guns were used. It's terrible, but it was seen as just fun and normal. Like even though half of the room were in shock and talked about it for years and years and years later. Yeah. Anyway, back to topic. But that was why we had you on last time, and in some ways you were just you still are a young man, but in some ways you were at a point where you may have been deciding what your career was. Did any of that Adventist kind of fear thrust you into the career path that you took, becoming an attorney?
No, if anything, it was a deterrent, because I was very interested in American politics, and I still am, but not nearly as much as I was in college. I got involved where I could. I went to local events when I could. I got people together to host watch parties for presidential debates between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. And we actually had a really good turnout, which is kind of surprising because most college kids aren't that interested in politics. At least they weren't at that time.
It's changing now.
Yeah. And being on, sometimes these labels get thrown around and there's a lot of conflation between them, but conservative SDA is not necessarily conservative evangelical or conservative politics. And my family, we're definitely more conservative leaning in our politics too. And that doesn't make you real popular on a college campus, let me tell you. But it was fun nonetheless. Anyway, being more conservative leaning both politically and in the SDA movement, the thought was always, well, there's always this background fear of the Sunday law kind of stuff, and you don't want to get too involved in politics because somebody can start the Sunday law and then you're culpable somehow, and in that way it was a bit of a deterrent. I'm not in a political career now. I do civil litigation and wills and trusts, those sorts of things. But it really was a deterrent at the time in terms of pursuing my interests. But anyway, I got through college finally with a history degree, and I graduated right in the fall of 2015. So December of 2015 leading into 2016. The job economy in the U.S. wasn't that good at that time, and so I struggled mightily to get a job, but actually ended up working at Glacier View Ranch in Colorado. Yeah, the Glacier View.
The Glacier View, ground zero.
Yeah.
For the church splitting without it realizing.
Yes. Yeah, and I had heard the name Desmond Ford, and I had heard that he had said some things about the sanctuary. I had at that time, no concept of what the debate was, what was going on with that. But I knew it had happened, and I remember talking to my then manager and still very good friend about, oh, hey, I heard about this thing that happened in 1980 up here at Glacier View. What do you know anything about? He wasn't there at the time, but it was an interesting conversation because he knew about it, and he said, oh yeah, that just happened right upstairs there. And
wow, boy, that would have been amazing to have a look. I guess not knowing anything about it, it wasn't as big a deal, but later on you may have reflected on that and thought, hang on a second, I was there in the space.
Well, you want to learn something funny. Is one of the first things I did in learning about Glacier View and my journey out was I was listening to a debate that Dr. Ford was, I wish I could remember which one it was, but it was a video on YouTube, a couple hours long, of Dr. Ford talking about the sanctuary. And at that time I had no understanding of what he was saying, but I just remember I decided I was not sleeping one night because I couldn't sleep, and I decided to just go work on folding some towels for the lodge that were in this conference room all stacked up, and I just was listening to this lecture or debate or whatever it was, as I'm folding these towels, and talked to my manager. His name's Dan. Talked to Dan the next day. Oh yeah, this guy Desmond Ford, they said something about Glacier View, and sure enough, it happened in the same room where I was folding towels the night before.
Wow.
Funny how life works.
Yeah. How old was the guy you were speaking to? Like you said he wasn't there, but was he in the age group that would have known a bit more about it?
He's old enough he could have been there if he were an administrator. I mean, his career path was in hospitality before he worked for the church, and so he did similar things. I've actually known him and his family for quite a long time, going back to those days at Camp Osable, actually, because they had worked there too. Still keep in touch. They're great people. And I think sometimes, I'll just use this as a footnote. I think sometimes when we talk about our leaving, that it somehow is taken as we're mad at people, or we're upset with people, or we want to cut off ties with people that we know and love from our SDA friends and family. And I think if you watch this podcast or some of the others, you'll find very quickly that that's just not the case. We still love our friends and family. We're not trying to rip on them or something. We're just trying to say this is what we've learned, and this is why we believe as we do now.
Yeah. And often when people say things like that you've got an axe to grind, or you're bitter, or you're attacking, or you're angry, they're responding to just how they feel. They feel that we're attacking them, their identity, whereas really we're just looking at the ideology and the ideas and the beliefs and thought systems. But very rarely will people who say to you, you're just bitter. I was thinking the other night about this, and I thought none of the people I know, and the people who say that are often the progressive Adventists, which surprised me. None of them actually address the claims that are being made. They leave it at, oh, you're just bitter, or you just have an axe to grind. Oh, you're going on and on about this again. None of them. I thought through all the ones that have made those kind of suggestions, none of them have said, okay, well, let's look at what you're saying.
Yeah, it's true. So I'll just go back to my time.
Let's go back. And just one quick, Moto Sapien has said, glad to have you on, and I hope you have a chance to field some questions later on forensic atonement in light of the American legal system. So we'll come to that a little bit later. But back to the story. We're on the journey, and I'll stop sidetracking.
Well, I'll just respond minimally to Moto Sapien and just point out that I know just enough criminal law to pass the bar exam, and the rest of what I do is not related to that. So I'm afraid it can't be of much use there. Anyway, all that aside, so I was at Glacier View Ranch. This was 2016. Started that summer, not during summer camp, but August of 2016, and knowing the manager already and some of the other people who worked there, it was very much understood mutually that I'm out of college now. This is just until I find another job. I ended up being there for a little over a year, and I can't tell you exactly how many things I applied to, but like many people my age in this last 15, 20 years, depending on where it is, couldn't find a job to save my life. I was applying left, right, and center to just about everything, and I could not get a job. And I just, in spite of having a good relationship with the people there, I just started to feel more and more trapped and isolated. And part of that was financial too, because like many American millennials, I had a lot of student loan debt, and it's kind of hard to get ahead on working for the church as a part-timer, essentially. And I don't mean that as a criticism, it's just the reality of where I was. So I just got increasingly stressed about moving forward with my life, and I won't spend too much time on that, but it was a stressful enough time that I actually was hospitalized from it. And I'll just say it wasn't anything life-threatening. It just, something happened that required some medical intervention, and I was okay in the long run. But mentally and emotionally, that was I don't want to say breaking point, but certainly a turning point for me. That I was so frustrated, and at that point in my life, I truly was angry and becoming an angry and bitter person, because I again had all this student debt. I was able to make my payments, but I didn't go beyond that much. Had all this debt. I wasn't getting anywhere in life, and to that point, I had done the things that you're supposed to do when you're Adventist or not. You grew up in the U.S. Everybody tells you your whole life you got to go to college. How, at least in my generation, we were all told we just have to get a degree. It doesn't matter what you study whatever you want. You just have to get that piece of paper, because college graduates earn $1 million more over their lifetime, and all these arguments that basically only apply to people 40 years older than me, just based on when those studies were actually done. And so it left a lot of us, myself included, in this debt trap. And without wanting to go further into American policy, I felt stuck. And when I finally got to that turning point, I decided it was time for me to go, even if it was just to go back, live with my parents for a few weeks until I found something, because I wasn't finding anything when I was in Colorado. My parents were still in Michigan at that time, so I decided I was going to go back to school. Not to law school, though. I was going back to Union at that time. So I should back up a step. Fall of 2017, I went home for a few weeks just to de-stress, relax. I went back to Lincoln, came back to Lincoln, started a part-time job to, live out here, got an apartment, and went back to school in January of 2018. I did another 3 semesters at Union College. This time I did a business degree in finance. At that time, they had a scholarship program. You could come back. At that time, for me, it was free tuition. I don't know if they still do that or not. But anyway, it was good for me because I got out of where I was feeling stuck, and that was nobody's fault. It just is what it was. So back at Union, it was 2018. We were just coming off of course, the year 2017 is the 500-year anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. So somewhere that fall or maybe winter, I had gone to Barnes & Noble or some other bookstore, and I picked up a couple of books about the Reformation. Because even though I was frustrated and angry and just not sure what was going on with my life or where it was going to go, I was still interested in history. It's what I had studied in my first degree program, and so I just wanted to learn more about the Reformation. It seemed like a timely thing. The 2 books I picked up were Eric Metaxas' biography of Martin Luther and a more general history book of Protestantism. It was Protestants, the Faith That Made the Modern World by Alec Ryrie. I highly recommend them both if you're interested in that topic. They were both very, very good. And I started reading those, and what I thought was just going to be a purely biographical and historical study of Luther and the Reformation turned out to be far more than that. Because if you study the life of Martin Luther, he was a very self-tortured individual before his conversion. So he originally was studying to become a lawyer, and he's riding through the woods at some point on a horse going somewhere, and this tree as the story goes, this tree nearby gets struck by lightning, and Luther, again, as the story goes, calls out, "Saint Anne, help me," essentially pleading for his life, and decides to become a monk. And so he gives up his legal studies and goes to a monastery, and he studies there. When he was in the monastery, you read stories about him, things like him going to his confessor and saying things like, "Well, at lunch yesterday, Brother Hans had a ever so slightly better cut of meat than I did, and I coveted it." And that was his confession. And this self-torture got so annoying to his confessor that one of his penances for Luther one day was, "Go commit a sin worth confessing." And it's kind of funny, but at the same time, the actual situation was, as Metaxas describes it, is that Luther knew he was sinful, and he was determined to get to the root of it and root it out, even if he had to dig all the way down through who he was to get it out. And only when Luther discovers Romans and reads and studies Romans, the just shall live by faith, does he really understand that it's not about getting our act together. It's all about what Christ has done, what Christ has accomplished. And I had heard that before, but it hadn't really set in the same way. And in the other book I was reading, it starts with Luther and the other reformers, and then goes through the history of Protestantism through its different strains, all the way up to the date of publication, basically. And what that author, Alec Ryrie, I believe he's an Anglican theologian, what he does is he spins everything as positively as he can about all these disparate groups, because he's not just talking about the mainstream threads of Protestantism. He's also talking about some of the quasi-Christian groups like the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists even get mentioned. Some of the other earlier groups too, even fanatical ones. And he tries to spin them all as positively as he can, and he identifies what he thinks unites all of these disparate groups. And what he says it is that each and every one of them, in their own way, have a passionate love affair with Jesus. And that's the phrase he uses, a passionate love affair with Jesus. And that's the central ethos of all these disparate groups under the umbrella of Protestantism. And that sunk into me too, because I realized that, at least at that time in my life, I really didn't have that. And I see Mark's comment reacting that SDA is quasi-Christian. Maybe we'll get to that. But the point is, he mentions some of these other groups that are outside of the mainstream. So I decided that whatever I was dealing with mentally and emotionally, I wasn't going to let that determine whether I continued in my faith. And I should, again, back up a step and just point out that I was so frustrated at this point in my life that I was telling some of my closest friends that I didn't even know if I wanted to be a Christian, much less an Adventist anymore. And I decided I was just going to study it out and see if it just held water. And by it, I don't mean Adventism specifically, just Christian Christian thinking in general. So I just started looking at whatever freely available resources I could find. Not necessarily Adventist, just whatever I could find about just the basics of Christianity. So I was watching YouTube lectures and series on the Trinity, how it develops over time, what it is, what it isn't. William Lane Craig, the Christian apologist, has a YouTube series that's really good on that. Some others, like R.C. Sproul, the Reformed theologian, listen to some of his materials, not only on the Trinity, but the nature of God, the nature of man, what is original sin, just some of the core doctrines of Christianity. And I don't know why this one stuck out at the time. I didn't know why, I should say. This stuck out so much. But the late Christian apologist, Ravi Zacharias, went on, I think it was Dave Rubin's podcast. And I recognize that Mr. Zacharias, some things came out about him after he died that he had some pretty significant character flaws. But in this conversation he had with the host, one of the things that Ravi said to the host was, one thing that we Christians often get wrong is we make the gospel about making bad people be good. The gospel is really about making dead people live. And I don't remember a thing about that podcast except for that line. It stuck with me so much. And that was such a light bulb moment.
Can you say that line again? It was quite special.
And I may not be quoting it verbatim, but he said to the host, the gospel is not about making bad people be good. It's about making dead people live. And that was such, like I said, a light bulb moment for me that I just had to stop and ponder it. It had never dawned on me that way before. Like, what it means to be born again doesn't just mean to act differently. It means you are a different person, fundamentally.
Yes, that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was...
Yeah, boy, that's
I'm still learning.
Because otherwise you're not changed. If you're
Right.
if you're just acting differently, you're not changed. That is
right.
profound,
And I had struggles just like everybody else does, and I had things that I was working on and just couldn't shake. But then after I saw that clip and really thought about it, and I'm not expressing it very well, but when I really understood what that meant and understood that, by putting my faith in Christ, that makes me a new creation. Well, that's when my habits started changing. That's when some of these years-long struggles just started fading away, like it wasn't there. Because I finally understood that it's not about mere character change. Yes, your character will change. That will happen. But you're not working on yourself to get it or keep it. You're working, sure, you work on yourself, but you're only doing that in the first place because you already have salvation. You already have the Lord. And I know that before all of this, back when I was, a teenager or in college, I was very committed to the Adventist Church. And I know that I would have said that at times, but I didn't conceive of it the same way that I do now. And that's sometimes difficult to explain. And I think maybe that's one of those language barrier gaps that sometimes Adventists and non-Adventists, or Adventists and former Adventists, have when we try to converse with each other. So that just kicked off this renewed interest in learning about the Bible. I mean, I was already interested, obviously, because I was studying these things. And I should say, these are not scholarly studies I was doing. These are just very layman's level things. But along with all of that, I was reading my Bible. I was reading the text for what it said. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I was able to set aside those inherent biases that we all have, at least to the degree that you can, and just let the text speak without assuming you know what it means. Because I remember that. I remember I would read my Bible, say in college, when I was a very committed SDA, and I would just immediately be fitting whatever I was reading. Didn't matter if it was the Psalms or Genesis or the New Testament, whatever. I was just inherently fitting it into whatever I had been taught about it.
Yes.
And we all do that.
Yeah.
we all, human beings do that.
Through the lens.
Right. But I was able to take that lens off and just read it as if I had never read it before. Read it as if it was a brand new book that I had never opened. Again, to the best of my ability to do that. And just let
some of us, that's like
speak.
starting again. Like some people are able to kind of go, okay, well, I'll get rid of that and now I'll see it this way, and it's refreshing. But for some of us, it's a total deconstruction, and then reading it is almost like, whoa, what does that mean? Where do I go to find out more about that? Oh, that's exciting. But it's like a totally reborn experience.
Right. And
which can be hard.
I know I'm not criticizing your use of the word here, but I know the word deconstruction often gets thrown around. But being a lawyer, we like to use precise language. And again, I'm not critiquing you. I'm just, the reason I don't use the word deconstruction to describe what I went through is fundamentally what deconstruction is just destruction.
Yeah. For me, I was using the right word. It was a total destruction of all my beliefs to the point of agnosticism, and I had to rebuild everything. And after it was like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah, and I'll say I was close to that. For me, the way I describe it to people is it's more like reformation, because yes, you're taking things apart, but the ultimate goal is to build it better, build it back. I don't want to use a politically driven phrase, but to build it stronger than it was before.
Yeah. And I think that's what I was saying. And I know it's only a small percentage of people who watch the show would empathize or feel the same as me. It for people who can do that and find the parts and make it more of a reformation experience, I kind of look at those kind of former Adventists with a little bit of jealousy, because they move faster back into a relationship and an understanding of the gospel. And here I am, 9 years later, so pleased that we have our weekly Good News Fellowship, because I get to sit at the feet of those who have gone through a lot of this at a faster pace. And so I'm only belaboring this point because I know some people are watching that also had that experience where you didn't even really have the pieces anymore to know what to pull back together. So for some of us, it's a really slow, arduous, long journey. But, the other night I was climbing this outdoor staircase by the beach, And on one side, I looked and there were whales way off in the distance splashing, and I looked in the other direction and the sun was setting, and there was literally clouds with the classic silver lining around the edges. And I felt like I feel the joy in the process of all this in a comparable kind of way. Struggling up the staircase, cold wind blowing on my face, but there was the beauty in the distance and the hope. And so I only belabor that point because I know there are a handful of people that watch the show that understand that, and I want to encourage them to stick with it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And I'll just say that I'll recognize that people sometimes use that phrase, that word deconstruction, differently.
Yes.
So I
I agree, and I'm glad you said that, because that it gave me a chance to unpack a little bit more of my journey,
Yeah.
and B, it helps people understand a little bit more of a process they can take, and being more careful with that word, because really it's a reformation that they're wanting to follow, not unlike what Luther went through.
Right. And
see, a lot of people say, for example, you mentioned Des Ford earlier. A lot of people say he was the Luther of Adventism, but there has been no reformation. 45 years later, there has not been a reformation. 79, he did that incredible Spectrum Forum meeting. Glacier View the year after, his 3-part manuscript, in spite of him nailing his thesis to the door of Adventism, there has been no reformation. And when these guys finally said, hey, let's reclaim the prophet, and try to piece together a reformed Adventism, it's banned. So the analogy of and the story of Luther that you're unpacking so well, and I'm getting these little insights pinging. I'm going, wow, I didn't know that before. Relate perfectly to the Christian's growth. But for an Adventist to talk about Luther, I don't think that it's something they can fully grasp. And another reason why when people leave the Adventist church, they flounder understanding the Luther's journey.
No, and I know, I don't know the ins and outs of the Great Controversy, Ellen White's writing in the Great Controversy on Luther. I know she gets some of the historical details incorrect, but somebody could correct me on this. But doesn't she doesn't she portray Luther as like standing boldly at the Diet of Worms? Here I stand, yes. I can do no other.
Yes, exactly.
That's not what it was.
And how incredible that 9 years later, I'm hearing you say some stuff that's making me go, oh, hang on. I've still been looking at the Luther story through the Adventist lens.
Mm-hmm. Well, and frankly, a lot of that stuff comes from very common concepts of who Luther was from Ellen White's day, from other authors, setting aside the whole plagiarism piece.
Yeah.
She was just, fact of the matter is, influenced by the writings of her time and the available materials of her time. And so a lot of Christians today and back then both believed that Luther was this like bold figure, at least at the Diet of Worms. He was in his writings. But actually at the Diet of Worms, when they challenge him on his theology, his reaction is so sheepish that they can't even hear him. They have to ask him to repeat himself. And he just says, unless I can be persuaded by manifest reason or by scripture, here I stand. I can do no other. And wow. He was terrified in that moment.
Wow.
Yeah. It's incredible to read about Luther, and my memory is not the best on that book because I read it 6 years ago at this point. Anyway, it's just another footnote on maybe deconstruction. Maybe it's different in other parts of the world, but in the U.S., when people say deconstruction, it's often like atheists trying to get people away from religion in general.
Yes.
And so that's part of the reason that a lot of American Christians don't want to use that phrase. But I digress.
They're important digressions.
Yeah, I'll back up again and just say that when I started my, I'm at the point where I don't know if I want to be a Christian anymore. I'm just going to re-examine this. What I determined for myself was that if I come out of this being more Adventist than ever, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm not going to run the other way just because it's what I grew up with. And on the flip side, I told myself, if I come out of this an atheist, I'm okay with that too. I had to be okay with, I'm going to pursue the truth, and I'm going to have to be okay with wherever it leads. And for me, it didn't lead out of Christianity. It led into Christianity. I again studied all those things, relearned the gospel, maybe even for the first time. I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
But I decided, okay, well, now that I've come through some of these more core doctrines of Christianity and learned some things about them, maybe I should, start looking at some other doctrines too. And I started thinking about, what should I study next? And a thought popped into my head. I never really could wrap my head around this investigative judgment thing. I believed it. I knew what I learned in school from it. October 22nd, 1844, Christ enters the Holy of Holies in the heavenly sanctuary, antitypical Day of Atonement, etc., etc. Like, I knew all of that. And I decided to look into that in the same way I had some of these other more fundamental Christian beliefs. And the first thing was I looked at Adventist sources, because I wanted to make sure I was remembering correctly from school, that I wasn't like missing something, didn't have some kind of gap in my knowledge that made it more difficult to understand. So I think I even started with some sermons by Stephen Bohr, Doug Batchelor, some of the more conservative leaning. Well, leaning conservative pastors I had heard all the time growing up. And like, no, this is all, I remember all of this. I don't, at least on this very layman's level, don't appear to have any real gaps in just the facts of what this belief is. And I asked myself, okay, are there any arguments against it? And that's when I found Desmond Ford again. This is after I was at GVR at this point.
Right.
But at this time, I actually understood what he was talking about.
Yes.
And I started listening to him. I found those old, excuse me, John Ankerberg show clips with him. And
aren't they the most powerful clips?
They're incredible. Yeah. Some of his lectures, I think I wish I had saved it because I can't find it anymore, but there was a video. It was really just audio, but it was on YouTube, and it was his 1978,
1979. I've got that here on the channel. It's pretty much the Seventh-day Adventist Progressive Manifesto. It's a 1-hour talk, October 27, 1979. I did it only a few months ago maybe 6 months, where I cleaned up the tape that I'd had from someone and just re-released it. Bang! It's just the whole thing. It's like 2 hours of information. He speaks so fast in 1 hour, and it's incredible. Yeah. In
I'll
fact,
have to
I'm
go
glad
find
you
that and hear it
raised it,
again.
because I'm actually going to be doing a show that says that the Progressive Adventist Manifesto is that 1 hour recording and this book. If there are progressives out there that want to create Adventism as they see it should have progressed, this book, that 1 hour manifesto, then you might achieve some kind of reformation. I doubt it, but that's the only pathway, in my humble opinion. And by the way, just
It's
quickly,
really
what I
interesting.
said about Des earlier, and there having never been a reformation in the Adventist Church, I wasn't criticizing Des.
No.
He was a reformer. He said, he put into place all the things that needed to be said and could be said. And as I said, that 1 hour message that you're talking about, if people had truly grasped that and followed that, his reformative mindset, ideology could have made some changes. Just because it didn't is no reflection on him. Just wanted to make that clear. Some people in chat thought I might have been putting him down. I'm the champion of Des Ford, not necessarily in that I agree with his conclusions now, but in that he deserves to be heard still, and not forgotten. So I'm a champion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting his name out there big time.
And I'll just add that it may not be this lecture in particular, because I don't remember exactly what was in this particular one. Just in finding all this stuff of Des Ford that I found, it seemed very apparent to me that his argument about Antiochus Epiphanes being the actual little horn was entirely secondary to what he was actually saying.
Yes, yeah.
Which is that the investigative judgment is ruining people's assurance. And somebody correct me if I misunderstood him, because that's what I got out of listening to him. Is he cared much more that people had assurance of salvation.
100%. Yes, 100%. Yeah.
And I really appreciated that about him, because I mean, I grew up singing the song "Blessed Assurance," but if you actually listen to the words of that song, the author, Fanny Crosby, is not saying that I can just have some sort of generic sense of, it's all good. No, that's not what she's saying. She's actually saying, she's actually talking about eternal security.
Yes.
That's what she's saying, is we're the heir of salvation. It's language from Galatians. We're adopted into the family of God. This is a certainty for us.
Yeah. And in one sentence or paragraph, the people who have been influenced by Des would say the greatest influence was that through his teachings, my assurance of salvation was restored. Or, the assurance of salvation is the big message, not his thoughts on the 457 BC and the 2,300 days and Ellen White getting visions wrong. He just breathed a sense of your salvation is assured into the church. Mark Anthony writes, it's interesting, Peter, you don't agree with him, but you champion him. That's exactly like people who won't leave SDA. Yes, I'm not championing his message, though I once did. And when I say that 1 hour manifesto and this book are the progressive Adventist gold mine, the gem of Adventism is found in that 1 hour Des Ford message at Spectrum in 79 and this book, I am not saying that I agree with that message. Isn't that an interesting nuance? You might be able to help me as a lawyer explain that better.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking
their freedom of speech and the fact that their progressive gem is most defined well in this book and that 1 Hour Manifesto. I champion people's freedom to speak, and I'm trying to tease apart the definitions of Adventism to make them understand each other better. But I don't have to agree with.
Right. We were just talking about Martin Luther, and it's apparent that we both greatly admire Martin Luther, but
yes,
I'm not a Lutheran.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a funny one. It's a funny one because people often ask me about that. Why don't you believe in the traditional Adventist ideology or the progressive Adventist ideology, but you seem to be a champion of
those
them?
are the only two options.
I'm just simply saying that the traditional Adventists, when I hear them talk about Adventism, their explanation of it is more accurate to source material than the progressives. And then the progressives come along and want to reclaim it and make it seem something different. And I respect their right to do that. And so I'm really just trying to identify that they are both very different and should get out of each other's hair.
Well, talking about precise language, I mean, conservatives and progressives, those labels fit exactly what we're talking about here. Conservatives are those who oppose radical and significant change. Progressives are those who seek radical and progressive and significant change.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the dichotomy is right now. So I know some people don't always like those labels, and yes, there's some nuance, but it fits.
Yeah. Mark Anthony asks me a question: where do you and Des Ford differ? I mean, that would take us the whole show, Mark, but it's not even something I'm really even interested in. I'm interested in sitting back and going, well, here's what Des said, and here are the people that agree with him, and here's what the traditional Adventists teach, and here's all the source material that agrees with them. Why are they trying to blend the two together? Let's give them both a platform to share their thoughts and ideas and beliefs so they can decide what the differences are, so they can decide what they align with and don't align with. For me, I'm making no claims. I don't even really care. I would say I don't even know enough. How's this? After 400 interviews and at least 3/4 of them would have mentioned Des Ford in them, I would say I'm not even totally sure exactly what Des Ford believed in the nuances, but he taught assurance of salvation, and that gave me hope as a young Adventist at the time. Whereas the other side were teaching me fear and legalism. So, I just ran from those ones and was gravitating to Des. But I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the details of his theology. Therefore, I don't even know really where I would differ. That's for way smarter people than I. And Mark says, let's have a whole program on where Peter and Desmond part ways. It'd be a very short program. And Mark adds he's intrigued. Dale asks, Pete, do the Aussies have free speech in your Bill of Rights? Not as clearly as you guys in the USA have. Ours is not as clearly written up that way. And Carrie, by the way, what date did you say that you were going to be on? Is it next week? She writes, we don't have to agree with everything someone believes in order to believe their voices are important. Yeah, that's right. I mean, you guys in the States, and we won't go there because it'll totally distract from the topic, but there's some very polarized politics going on at the moment over there. And at least the two groups can identify the differences. Some agree to disagree. Some want to bash each other on the head. But the Adventists the progressives don't even seem to realize how different they are. Like to write a book that they feel that they can reclaim and place Ellen White in more of an inspirational role. When I was watching almost everything out of the GC in the last week or so, one thing that the Adventist leaders were constantly saying was, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. They were coupling the two phrases. Adventism is the Bible and the spirit of prophecy interwoven to the point where you must see Ellen White on an incredibly authoritative level, or you're just following a watered down, confused kind of Christianity, kind of Protestantism.
Well, here's one of the areas where, for me personally, maybe some of the cracks started forming is even as a teenager, like 14, 15 maybe. I remember being taught, all through my life how inspired Ellen White was, how she's the spirit of prophecy, she's the end times prophet, whatever you want to put there. And I actually personally, as a kid, found her writings much harder to read than the Bible in some ways, because she uses this very flowery 19th century language. And for me as a kid, that was hard to read. But, the snippets that you read in your Sabbath school lessons aren't too terribly complicated most of the time. But I remember being told that she said about herself, she is the lesser light leading to the greater light, and that if Adventists had just followed the Bible, they wouldn't have even needed her. I mean, I remember as a child hearing that, and thinking to myself, if that's true, then I can just read the Bible and I don't really need her.
Yeah.
And so, even though I would quote her from time to time, for me, if I was going to go study, I would read her books if I was reading something, usually because I had to for Pathfinders or something like that. But if I was going to actually want to study the Bible as a kid, I actually just read the Bible. I mean, I read through Genesis when I was 12 or something, Genesis and Exodus, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. But even as a kid, I didn't particularly see a strong need for her, although I certainly assented to what I was taught, that she was a prophet and that she was inspired. Anyway, as I got older and went through what I have described so far, I get to 2017, 18, 19 is when I really am starting to devour all of this stuff about the investigative judgment. I'll go back to that.
Yeah.
Not to get into the theology of it, but along with seeing the arguments for and arguments against, I'm still reading the Bible through all this. I'm not just taking somebody's word for it either way about what the Bible says. Although certainly the things that Des Ford and some others that I was listening to were saying made sense. One day I went to the fundamental belief statement just on the website. I have the book somewhere, but I went to the website for this. And I looked at every single support text. And I just went one by one through all the supporting texts for the investigative judgment and the sanctuary in the statement of fundamental beliefs. It starts out in Leviticus with the Day of Atonement. Okay, well, if you're going to say this is the antitypical Day of Atonement, of course it starts there, right? That makes sense. And then I got to these passages in Ezekiel, and where's the other one? There's two, about the day for a year principle. I think one of them's in Ezekiel. The other one I think has to do with the Israelites having to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. But anyway, the two texts that support the day for a year principle very clearly in context are just saying that this is a symbol of Israel's disobedience in some way. One for Ezekiel having to lay on his right side for a certain number of days for representing years. It's numbers. Thank you, Rick. And then on his left side, Ezekiel, again, for a certain number of days representing years of Judah's apostasy. And then in Numbers, they get the judgment of wandering in the wilderness for 40 years for listening to the unfaithful spies that went into the land of Canaan. It's very clear that that day for a year is just a symbol of God's judgment for Israel's disobedience.
Mm.
It is absolutely not a hermeneutical principle. It's you cannot pull that from, even just reading. I mean, I was just reading my English Standard Version, maybe flipping back between that and an NIV or an NASB or something. You can't get that out of the text. It's just not there.
Mm.
And the absolute nail in the coffin for the investigative judgment, I looked and looked and looked and looked for any New Testament passages that talk about the Day of Atonement and what it means for Christians. And at the time, I could only find one. I know of at least two now, but at the time, I could only find one. And that was Hebrews chapter 9. And of course, I read more than Hebrews 9. I read eventually through the entirety of Hebrews, but started with 9 and then backed up to 7, 8 to get some context for 9. But when I read Hebrews chapter 9, I actually have it pulled up here. I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but when I read through that, studying this out, the author of Hebrews describes the tabernacle, describes the worship system, and he describes the most holy place, and he contrasts that with the ministry of Christ. And unlike the Levitical priests that went into the tabernacle with the blood of bulls and goats, I think it is, well, that should stick in our minds because that's Day of Atonement. That's the Day of Atonement ceremony that's in view there, along with the daily sacrifices, but including the Day of Atonement. Unlike those things that had to be repeated year after year, Jesus went in to the very presence of God once for all. And when I read that phrase, once for all, in learning it new for the first time,
yes,
it was clear. There was nothing further to be accomplished. There wasn't something to happen 18 centuries later. It was done.
yes.
And in the context of Hebrews, the thing that makes Christ's priesthood better is that what the Levitical priests in their repetitious cycles could never do, take away sin, that's what Christ did all at once. It's
Yes.
gone. It's absolutely gone. There's not some future, I'm going to look at the records now, there's this transference, and I'm going to look through the records and make sure everything's confessed. That's not there. That's not what it is. It's finished.
Yeah.
Jesus said so himself. It is finished. He said so.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know why we can't take him at his word.
That is the nail in the coffin of the IJ, the investigative judgment teaching. You know, there's just, if I said this to Steve Daly once when I was interviewing him, and that if in that 7-year period that, you know, as they were approaching 1851, Ellen White and all of them were thinking, yeah, it's the 7 years, he's coming back. And that's when she wrote things like what you have had, what we have had years to prepare for, you will only have months, this kind of thing. If the Lord had returned in I kind of feel like that 7 year is the maximum to be able to say an imminent return. If he had returned in 1851, excuse me, you could have said Adventism was the perfect. Yes, that was correct. There was a last time investigative judgment, and it happened, and it culminated in the Lord's return. But the further you fly away from that date, the less you can make this atonement as an ongoing kind of thing work. You just can't. Eventually progressive Adventists are going to have to say, look, yeah, okay, we're going to jettison all of those silly doctrines, and because you cannot. The atonement, as you say, at the cross, once and for all, done. That's it. That's what the whole Christian message is about. So you cannot have 1844, 51, 1881, 1919, 1957, 1980. You just cannot have all of that work in the end. It doesn't add up after a while.
No, it doesn't. And in that moment, I don't remember exactly when it was in 2018-19, but I knew as soon as it hit me that the IJ falls, Ellen White falls.
Yeah. Now, I'm interested in what you think on this question that popped into my head as you said that.
Yeah.
One thing that I disagree with Des Ford that's not theology is that once you do away with that teaching, you have to do away with Ellen White's authority. And she confirmed all those dates. She said,
Right.
God told me in vision, God spoke to my ear that these dates were correct, that William was right on the dates, but he got the what happened wrong. I can't understand why Des was still able to incorporate Ellen White into an Adventist kind of ideology. He seemed to be able to do that. Whereas to me, I'd go, no, once you have removed her, you have removed the authority not only of that teaching, but of her claim to be a special messenger of God or a prophet or God speaking in her head, because that information is inaccurate. And what does the Bible say? If a prophet makes one mistake, they are a false prophet. They are blasphemous. I
Right.
don't know, and I'm interested in what your thoughts, especially as a lawyer, how.
Yeah.
And I've asked Gillian this too. How does one still incorporate Ellen White into the landscape if you have revealed that she is also a false prophet?
Yeah, and that's something that I thought about at the time because I was really appreciating Des Ford, and I had seen that he very much wanted to stay with the Adventist Church. He wanted to still be an Adventist minister. He even makes a little quip on the John Ankerberg show about accepting the apology that Ankerberg isn't an Adventist.
Yes, I know.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And I had to think about that. And somewhat more recently, I was talking with a friend of mine who's in a similar position about Ford, because this individual had met Ford at one time, didn't know him well, just met him once. And we were discussing that very question, and this is purely speculation, but I think what my friend's view is and what my view is the same, that maybe this is just sort of a compromise. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean I think he knew that if you do away with her prophetic ministry, and even if you try to make her more pastorally inspired in the same way as maybe a C.S. Lewis or something like that, that you do lose all these other Adventist doctrines and vice versa. I think he knew that, and I think maybe he's just trying to extend an olive branch.
Yes,
Of
that has
compromise.
been my conclusion as well. Yeah. Mark Anthony writes that I've got the concept wrong, that Des viewed Ellen White as pastoral. I agree. I know that's what he was saying. That's really what these guys are saying. My point, Mark, isn't saying that he didn't say that or didn't even think that. My point is that how does one not extrapolate further when you go, okay, Ellen White clearly was wrong on those dates. This didn't happen. Let's progress in the Adventist church to seeing her as pastoral. Let's progress in the Adventist church and do away with 457. And let's see it as a, providential date. That's fine. But let's return the atonement to the cross and the cross alone. When a progressive does that, this other little thing was niggling in the back of my mind. But hang on, guys. Yes, that's all good and well. But she said God told her and confirmed those dates were accurate. So you can keep calling her pastoral if you want, but to me, that indicates she did not receive a message she claimed to have received. And if she got it wrong or she misinterpreted it, whoa, a whole religion was started on that false interpretation. So good luck trying to reclaim that and correct that, because to me, as Angela says, that's implying a false inspirational prophet. You can be pastoral and be a false prophet. You can do good things, be a nice person, and still have made massive inaccurate claims. So what do you do with that? If you're a God-fearing person, what do you do with the information that the claim that forms the only distinct belief in your church, the claim is a false one? What do you do with that? That's what seems to be squirreled away. And like you just said there, Ray, I think it's because these guys did know that, but they were speaking huge bits of information. To add that into the mix would have just not even given them a voice. It would have been just like too much for Adventists to take. And when you listen to that, and I just found it, that particular program that I mentioned about the October 27, 1979 forum meeting that Des took. When you listen to that carefully, you can see that there's almost like a respectful way to incorporate Ellen in, but and to keep her there as pastoral, but let's not address the elephant in the room just yet. And I've heard Bill Johnson say, why don't you just put it in your back pocket for now, and Adventist Church will evolve eventually to that point. Whereas Des, the power of his reformative kind of speaking was, no, let's draw the line in the sand now. And he was forced in many ways to draw the line in the sand that point in 1980 at Glacier View. Can you just reiterate again what you said about what you think those guys were doing? Surely, I've interviewed a lot of them, and I can't work out why they aren't going, explosion. Ellen White said she got this from God. It didn't actually come from God. What are we going to do with that? And they kind of put that big fizzing, explosive firecracker box over to the side. Oh, let's just see her as pastoral and a lovely woman. I don't get that.
I'll just reiterate it. I think what Dr. Ford and others were trying to do is extend an olive branch and just say we're going to go this far but no further on that question. And it's to try to keep the peace. It's to try to allow that gradual evolution to happen. And the institution isn't going to have it, because they also know that they also know that they can't have this remnant identity without Ellen White.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they can't have the identity without Ellen White. Mark adds there that Des even said where she's wrong, she's wrong. But to me, okay, if you say, oh, okay, Joseph Smith was wrong, I agree. He was wrong here. He was right there. What's the elephant in the room? Being wrong has massive implications, because it's not just like you, Ray, being wrong, or me being wrong, or even Luther being wrong. He had some pretty hairy kind of things that were flawed as well. It's not about whether we're right or wrong. It's about someone saying, God told me this, and that information is wrong. What do you do with that person? You can steer her into pastoral waters if you want, and being a nice, fluffy, inspiring person and a nice person, and you can do that. But you cannot build a religion around it anymore. It falls, it dies without that belief, that the investigative judgment, without it being confirmed from God. You cannot build a religion around it. Adventism is trying to continue and maintain, the progressives, a religion around an Ellen White that they want to put in the back seat. Adventism can only have any significance if it's believed by traditional, official, original Adventists that hold her on high. That's the only way you can make it work. It's wrong, but that's the only way you can make it work. You cannot make a nice, fluffy, reclaiming, prophetic Ellen White's just a pastoral, inspirational person. You cannot build a religion around that, guys. You can't do it.
No, I'll use an example of something that is in today's world. Obviously, we understand this as being very wrong, but some of the things that Ellen White said about interracial marriage, for example, are unthinkable for somebody to say today, and rightly so. We can forgive a 19th century American Christian woman for saying some of those things.
Of course.
We can, because that was the context in which she lived. But the difference is that Ellen White claimed God told her to say that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like Luther, when he was toward the end of his life, he wrote some pretty nasty things about Jewish people, very anti-Semitic things. And we all just kind of, in the Christian world, have kind of forgiven him for it, because we don't know where it came from or why he started doing that. It's just, maybe somebody knows, I don't know. But we understand that he was wrong, and we're not going to accept that teaching from him because it's wrong, and we'll just take the good and leave the bad going forward. And we forgive him for it. But he never claimed God said that to his ear, or God showed him in vision that Jewish people are somehow wicked more than anyone else.
Now, I'm not sure if we're still live, Ray. Can you hear me?
I can.
You've frozen. My screen is saying I'm not connected to the internet, which usually means you may well be live and I may not be. So if you keep chatting, and I will have to reboot my system, my end, but because it's a browser-based system, you 99%, I'm pretty sure you're still live and I'm not. So I can't tell my end, but we're still talking, but I'm going to reboot.
Okay.
You keep chatting, and I think you're on your own for a few minutes.
Okay. I see Mark Anthony says he can hear us both loud and clear.
Oh, okay, good. Well, let's keep going. I can't see the chat anymore, and it says I'm disconnected. So anyway, but so it's recording though, so future people will see this conversation. This doubtful what's going on one. But what you're saying there is so important for people to grasp. Luther never even claimed that kind of authority. And so when he makes a mistake, and you can see the things he did that were quite terrible, you can also go, hey, but that's just a mistake. but the things he said that were good, they add up. Whereas with Ellen White, you just cannot put her into that pastoral care inspirational person box, because she claimed to be more than that. And then if the revelations prove to be wrong and false, e.g. 1844 investigative judgment doctrine, what do you do with that? How do you process that?
And I think what you and I found, and many of the people in this chat are listening, is we finally realized we can't square that circle. And we need to the best of our abilities, follow what the Bible really says. So I'll just go back to my own story. Well, dovetail. Rick, I see you mentioned Mike Coburn. Yeah, I caught the beginning part of his stream tonight. I'll have to go back and watch that. Anyway, back to my story.
Can I just pause you? I know everyone can see me talking and you talking, but it's really frustrating my end with it's dropped out, you're frozen. I can't read any of the chat. Let's throw to a break. We're 1.5 hours in. We've got a good size audience. This is really important stuff. I want to be able to focus and be able to hear it properly. So I'm going to reboot my end. We'll put on our background music for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back, and I think I'll have been able to restore the issues my end. So if you're okay with that, you can hear me all right?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Cool. So if you're okay with that, we're going to have a 5-minute break. I'll fix the problem my end. Remember where you're up to, and we'll keep going from there.
Sounds good.
Talk in 5. I think. Looks like I can't even do that.
You love me so much more than I
So
could
Ray,
ever
if you're
know.
still there, I will bring
Your
you back
love
on.
is deeper than this world will ever show, and all of life's beauty shines around this moment now.
Are you still there,
The sky and the cliffs, they seem to
Apologies,
change my
everyone.
life
I'm
somehow.
really not sure what's going on here.
I
I'll try
will
and
never
use the
be-
countdown
will never be
timer,
the same.
and I'll try and
Never
I know
be
for you
the
guys it's
same.
fine, but for me it's very almost impossible. We'll be back
I
soon.
will never be the same. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show, and all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same never be, will never be the same, never be the same ever again, ever You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. Love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deep.
Hey, are we back?
I think we're back.
Hopefully someone in chat will let us know soon. I'm amazed that looking at the numbers watching, we haven't lost many people. So thank you everybody for pushing through. I'm not sure if it's totally started a whole new stream or if it's still the last one. I'm just going to have a quick look here, but apologies everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. But yeah, I think we are back. I can see all the chat from before. Carrie says yes, she can hear and see us both. Welcome back, says Jude. I think we're here. The lights are on. Okay, so a quick recap there, Ray. We were talking about Luther and how it's one thing to be an inspirational, pastoral, reformative kind of person and have genuine flaws. But Ellen Ellen's claims are more than that. And this is why it was hard. We were chatting about hard for us to understand why the progressive jettisons all of these crazy doctrines, the investigative judgment in many ways, or reframes them in very interesting ways. However, they don't jettison her. Just recap what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think it's just that as human beings, we don't want to give up what we hold most dear, and we're all like that. I'm certainly no exception. We were talking about how, in some ways, some of the Des Ford position was probably an olive branch and compromise to try to keep the peace in some ways. Again, not a criticism, just that's the conclusion that I've drawn. But I'm not sure I fully understood your question there. But it was
more just no. I think if you didn't understand, you've answered it well. Just that idea of these guys, surely they've had to have thought, come on, she's a false prophet. She said something that didn't happen, and she said it came from God. But they don't seem to bring that one onto the table. Stephen Beagles writes, Adventism can exist without 1844, but it is interesting when studied in light of the 70 weeks. Ray Smith says, interesting that Adventism won't let go 1844 go. And I can see why the traditional Adventist won't let it go. They hold Ellen White as the Bible and the spirit of prophecy. Ellen White is the spirit of prophecy. And to me, the interesting thing is, why won't the progressives let it go? Or they do try and let it go and see her as pastoral, but they won't let her go. They still want to love her as a nice person and inspirational and wonderful. They always go to look at the schools and the structure she's created and the churches and the hospitals. None of that matters. Joseph Smith has got all those things too.
Yeah. And funny story though, if Joseph Smith is wrong, then at least Ellen White's second vision is wrong.
You're saying it's a bit of a carbon copy?
Just a little. Just a little similar.
Just a tiny bit.
But we could speculate all the night long about why they're willing to let the inspiration go, but not totally let Ellen White go. I know for myself, when I get to the point where I realize I've relearned or learned the gospel, truly learned the gospel, and internalized the life, death, resurrection of Christ, and that's enough for my salvation. And at that point, this is late 2018 into 2019, somewhat. At that point in my life, I am fully okay with being Adventist again. I recognize that the IJ was wrong, investigative judgment, if anyone doesn't know what that meant. And ergo, Ellen White is wrong, and I'm gradually coming to be able to say that she's truly a false prophet. But at that point in time, I'm thinking, well, not every Adventist who ever lived stopped being Adventists because they simply disagreed with Ellen White. And Des Ford is a good case in point, but even in Ellen White's own time, that was true.
Interesting.
W.W. Prescott didn't accept, and again, I could be wrong about that, but my understanding is he didn't accept her prophetic inspiration or the investigative judgment, either one. At least not in the way that maybe the conservative side sees her as inspired. So I'm thinking, well, maybe she wrote some good things here or there, take her or leave her, which, I mean, even when I was a teenager and in college, I kind of felt that way, take her, leave her, whatever. I don't really care. at the time, not understanding that everything I believed was rooted in her prophetic confirmation. At that point in time, I was also starting to just listen to the former Adventist channel and Colleen Tinker, Nikki Stevenson,
Yes.
Dale Ratzlaff, and hear what their thoughts were. And at that point, I had sort of discovered what last generation theology was, contemporaneous with all this other study I'm doing. And I'm like, well, I don't believe that form. That's not my Adventism. Sound familiar?
Yes. You've watched the show.
Yeah, it's not my Adventism. That's not right.
Yeah.
And, if Jesus is waiting for a perfected people, if Jesus is waiting for a perfected people, then he's never coming back.
Yeah.
And that's just the honest truth. But at the same time, I was hearing Dale Ratzlaff and again Colleen Tinker and some of these others at former Adventist, and realizing, oh, they're critiquing last generation theology, and this was the official teaching. And I, at first, even though I didn't necessarily disagree with their criticisms, at first was very hesitant to accept what they were saying, but I couldn't stop listening. And the more I listened, the more I thought, wait a minute, that is what I was taught. I think I said this on the last time I was on. I never heard the phrase last generation theology growing up, at least not that I remember.
No, I didn't.
But I was taught that we'd have to live without a mediator.
Yeah.
That when probation closed, we'd had to be sinless. That we're vindicating God, that we're having to keep the law. All the investigative judgment, I was taught that. All the stuff that goes into last generation theology. I was taught all those elements. And in fact, I was going through a closet here in our apartment one time, maybe 6 months ago. And I happened to find some notebooks that I, for some reason, had hung on to from high school when I was at Great Lakes. I went there my junior year and my senior year. And I found a handout from my senior Bible teacher that had a study guide, just essentially a list of verses for the 28 fundamental beliefs. And sure enough, all that stuff was in the investigative judgment and the sanctuary section. All of it. And anyway, back in 2018-19, I'm very much against last generation theology at this point. But I'm slowly starting to realize at the same time that, wait a minute, that's what Adventism actually is.
Yes, yeah. This is why I'm really interested in your take on this, because when I ask the progressives, why are you still an Adventist when you know this? Most actually stay, but you're someone that I can ask of this. I can ask myself too, because I was the same. But you're someone I can ask of this and hear your rationalizing, your thinking process as you go. So I'm at the edge of my seat to hear how it unpacks next.
Well, so I actually worked for the Minnesota Conference as a summer intern after I finished my after I finished my second degree. And so this was, I finished my second degree in 2019, and I worked that summer in Minneapolis for the Minnesota Conference. And again, at this point, very against last generation theology. I met a now very good friend of mine there who was also working for the conference as a Bible worker. And we were, we were just fast friends and just hit it off really well. And he and I and some other people got together and we went, I think it was like Buffalo Wild Wings or something one night, just for fun to hang out. And we're just chit-chatting. And I remember at that time, again, even though I had by this point, disavowed last generation theology, I still conceived of myself as being a conservative in some sense, maybe not last generation theology conservative. But certainly I'd rejected the IJ by this point. I was starting to recognize Ellen White was false. So in that sense, maybe I was more of a progressive. But I certainly didn't identify myself that way. And I just remember making I don't even know what comment it was. I made some comment about my then opinions about something within the Adventist church. And it apparently struck a very moderate tone. And my friend asks me, Ray, how are you so balanced? Well, being as politically inclined as I am, moderation is not something I often get accused of. And so I was a little, taken aback, caught off guard by it. And I had to think about it for a second. And for me, where I was at the time is I was less conservative as an Adventist less than I had ever been. But also in the same way that I'm seeing the last generation side, the Fulcrum 7 blog and some others preach this sinless perfectionism nonsense, I was seeing equally wrong things from Spectrum, Adventist Today, not to criticize anybody personally. It's just some of the things that they proffer are very highly unbiblical, frankly, when it comes to some of the more modern political and social movements out there. And what I told my friend was, after thinking about it for a second, is I'm seeing heresies on the one side with social issues, and I'm seeing heresies on, like, fundamental heresies on the conservative side with what grace is. And frankly, I think what I was describing at the time is that they were, both ends of the spectrum were getting grace fundamentally wrong for very similar, even if opposite, reasons. And what I told my friend is, we think of this left-right spectrum, and we think of it that way because of politics or the church, progressive, liberal, whatever. And I just said to him, I just don't think of the gospel as being a compromise among heresies. We have this left-right spectrum, but the gospel's somewhere over here.
Yeah, I agree.
And I was pursuing that. So it really wasn't about balance for me. It was about pursuing truth.
Yeah. I've often thought that the gospel is where we go to find the common ground, and people, the progressives in the Adventist church say, oh, we're just on a pendulum swing. Well, because I see it, in my own humble opinion, as two separate religions in one, that they just don't realize it. The progressive, if they have their own pendulum swing, and so do the others on the traditional Adventists. They're not one big movement having a pendulum swing. And even if there is a pendulum swing, that has nothing to do with theology. That's more to do with your politics and your lifestyle and your standards. This pendulum swings there. But the theology isn't having a pendulum swing. Ellen White moved perhaps to a more righteousness by faith approach, but to her grave, she was upholding the great controversy as the book that everyone in the world needs to read. She was preaching she fully believed in 1844 that the investigative judgment began that night. She fully hadn't understood the atonement at the cross concept. So, yeah, there might be some kind of progression, but more to do with allowing yourself to have Christ come into your life so powerfully that he can help you lead a perfect life, which is not, again, incorrect. So yeah, I think you're right. And so therefore, if you are not seeing this left, right, progressive, conservative movement, or if you are seeing it as separate to the gospel, how even more important to get the gospel right.
Yes, absolutely. And
it-
and sort of contemporaneous with all of this again is I actually had to go back and learn what do people mean when they say righteousness by faith? Because
Mm.
you will find Adventists who use the phrase
They all
righteousness
bandy it
by
around.
faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they mean it identically to justification by faith,
Yeah.
depending on who you talk to. But from my very unscientific survey of that, that's the minority view. What most people seem to say with righteousness by faith is they talk about either sort of that last generation theology, justification, sanctification, sort of co-working together throughout your life, or maybe they just mean progressive sanctification, which progressive sanctification is a biblical concept, but it's also a little bit disordered when you conceive of it as righteousness by faith, because what they're really kind of saying either way is that we attain to a degree of righteousness as we go through our lives.
Mm.
And that's not what the Bible says. Sanctification is a real thing. But when Paul says we're justified by faith, or talks about the righteousness that comes by faith, Paul means justification every single time. He means that we have been declared, and in the Greek, I understand it's a legal term. So it's actually saying we've been adjudicated as righteous.
Yeah.
What's that verse in, I don't know, 2 Corinthians? He who knew no sin became sin for us that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's the doctrine of sanctification. We literally have the righteousness of Christ credited to us as if we had never sinned, and he takes all of our sin and sinfulness onto himself at the cross in that single moment in time.
Yeah.
Regardless of when we lived, what we've done, who we are.
The case is closed.
Case is closed.
Yeah.
Right. That's another flaw of the investigative judgment we were talking about earlier, right? Is that it's this later adjudication. Well, I'll put my legal hat on for a second. In the U.S., I'm sure Australia is similar, being rooted in the same English common law as the U.S. system.
Yeah.
We have a concept, and it's in Latin. It's called res judicata. The thing has been decided. If I go to court, if I take you to court here in Nebraska, and I sue you, and I win a judgment against you, I can't then go sue you again on the same stuff for the same facts, for the same wrong, because the thing's already been decided. I'm wasting the court's time. Well, to sort of borrow the concept of res judicata, we've been declared righteous. It would be a waste of, not that God even exists in time exactly, but
the people do.
It would be a waste of his efforts to do it again.
Yeah, the people do, and it's a waste of their time.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I have regrets. I in many ways was able to carve a really great life within the Adventist Church, bonding with the fellow progressives and people that were like-minded, and feeling like we had a mission to bring about a change into the church, like these guys. That these guys influenced me. They're slightly older, and but I do feel, and I could have been in any denomination and any religion and in society as a secular person. There's all sorts of crazy going on, and no one leads a perfect life. There's no utopia out there. So I'm not lamenting, but as a fact, I wasted so much time, and to this day don't fully grasp the nuances of the gospel that I could, because of that wasted time. It's just a fact. I'm not being a victim. I'm not complaining or crying or whinging about it. But just to highlight your point, if you try and re-adjudicate a closed case, you're wasting your time. It's just a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you. My experience personally was, I went through some stuff when I was in Colorado, but that had nothing to do with the Adventist Church, really. That was because of life circumstances more generally.
Yeah.
My experience in Adventism was largely positive. I knew people who had very negative experiences, people I'm close to even, that had very negative experiences, but that wasn't my experience. It was their experience. And so when I, read some of these blogs or comments and in some of these threads about people talking about their negative experience, I try to be very respectful of that, even though that wasn't my experience, because I know people who went through similar things.
Yeah. If you're hanging around a system, not the people, but a system that is designed to waste your time in understanding what the gospel truly is, the system is wasting your time, and the system is constantly hindering you. Like, I look back at my life, not so much as people trying to hurt me or make my life terrible, but the system was constantly slowing my progress. And so I look back with a certain degree of frustration that Adventism is not a benign movement. I doubt that if I'd been a Baptist or an Anglican or other denominations that are more benign, that I would have this same level of frustration. I certainly would have frustration with life. People would make mistakes. You'd come to headbutting moments or whatnot. But systemically, the Adventist Church not only is anti the gospel at every turn, as you try to progress in your life's endeavors, it has things at play that, like, I don't know if you ever tried swimming training or whatnot, but when I was young, I used to swim a lot. And one of the training techniques was to tie buckets to your ankles on a rope. You'd have 2 buckets, one on each leg, trailing behind you by a few meters. And you'd swim with these buckets tied to you, and it would slow your progress. And I view other denominations as maybe being in the wrong pool or swimming in the water's rough or whatever. But swimming with buckets is a whole other thing. And Adventism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons fall into this category where there's buckets tied to you. And so I feel the ropes have been tied, the ties have been cut. And I'm now swimming in the normal waters of life that are hard and confusing and whatever. But the freedom you feel from cutting those buckets off as you swim, that's kind of this joyous, oh, wow, now I want to learn more of how to better apply these teachings of Christ and how to have a more abundant life. And what is the gospel really saying? I've been set free, but now I'm just living that life of normal, trying to understand things. And that's why I think a lot of us talk into the Adventist community, because you can see the buckets being tied to people. Steve Beagles is watching, good friend of mine. I really, really value Steve Beagles. And I've said to him publicly, I feel like you're swimming with buckets, and not necessarily those exact words, because he's like a gospel Adventist, and he's swimming with this gem of Adventism that he sees and portrays very well on his own website and blog, Gospel Adventist. But you can't help saying, hey, unless you're training for some Special Olympics, why don't you just cut those buckets off?
I'll just borrow your analogy here. I think the gospel's even a step better than that. It's that Christ reaches down, cuts those buckets off, and then pulls us into the boat.
Yes.
That he is rowing.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And there's that relief as well, because you can go, oh, yes, okay. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy.
And I've got to respond to Moto Sapien. He or she, I don't know, has put forward some questions. If it's a legal system, then how could someone else pay the death penalty for me? Who would ever say that justice was served if I died on behalf of my murderous brother? Well, in the words of the now late John MacArthur, we don't want justice. we need grace. Justice means we all go to hell.
Right. Yeah.
And he also asked, if Jesus is our advocate to sway the judge, then wouldn't that be a corrupt system? No. No, not at all. Because guess what? Jesus is God, and he is the only true judge. You know the story of the woman caught in adultery? The point of the story is when he tells the Pharisees and the accusers, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Jesus is the only one there who has every right to pick up stones and start throwing them down, and he chooses not to. He is the righteous judge, and yet he's merciful, precisely because he did this seemingly, in our thinking, seemingly unfair thing.
Yeah. And would you say that you're outside the courthouse? So no, this action of Christ standing on your behalf is done. We're not sitting in there. You know, I think a lot of that mindset of Adventism keeps you in the courthouse, inside, with the court case going, and every action you make is somehow still occurring. But the reality is that the court case is closed, it's done. We're outside on the stairs outside. So
absolutely.
Maybe we need to get away from even thinking that it's a judicial system, because the judicial system is for the Pharisaical mindset, not for the gospel mindset.
Right. We take ourselves out of the defendant's seat and put ourselves in the jury.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
and that's human. That's human tendency.
Yeah.
Guilty. Anyway, so just going back to my own experience, realizing all these things are wrong, and not just wrong, but really antithetical to the gospel, to the finished work of Christ at the cross. I immediately went to, well, what else is wrong? So once I really discovered the gospel and had that true conversion experience in early 2018, at that point I was not questioning things like the Sabbath or the state of the dead. Even though I was questioning the investigative judgment and the sanctuary and ultimately rejected those, it took a while before I was even willing to re-examine those things, because it's not that I even was unwilling to. It was more like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Like, to me it seemed obvious, and because I was raised Adventist, and so we're all taught that, well, yeah, there's nothing in the Bible that says the Sabbath was changed to Sunday, and it's clearly still the seventh day, and we keep the Sabbath. We're the remnant. We're keeping the commandments of God. And when I realized the IJ's wrong, Ellen White's wrong, all of this is not just wrong, but anti-gospel, I immediately went, what else is wrong? Well, a lot of Christians disagree with Adventists about the Sabbath, and they're clearly following Christ, as far as I can tell. So is there merit to this argument? That was my question. Is there, even if they're wrong, is there at least a good faith reason to disagree with the Adventist Church about the Sabbath? Not only did I find out there was, I had to stop believing in the Sabbath as a binding commandment for Christians. I looked for all the texts I could find in the New Testament. And for the record, I don't think Christians discount the Old Testament or the books of Moses, because it's the New Testament that frames those books for us, and you need that context to understand the New Testament. But again, the New Testament frames it. So what does the New Testament say about the Sabbath? Well, those texts that I was always taught, Jesus in the synagogues, as his custom was, or Paul goes to the synagogues in the book of Acts, as his custom was. I had to do a little reading, but that word custom, That's not individual practice. That's not my habits. My customs are not my habits. My habits are I go to the coffee shop too many times a week. My customs are I wear red, white, and blue on the 4th of July. My customs are I celebrate Christmas to the nth degree because I'm an American, and that's what Americans do. It's more than just my individual practice or even how I individually do a certain tradition or custom. It's the fact that I'm participating in these customs the way that I do is cultural. It is a cultural norm that makes it a custom. And so when the gospel writers or Luke in the book of Acts say somebody was in the synagogues because that was his custom, what they're really saying is he's in the synagogues because he's a Jew. They're not saying that you, Gentile Christian, go and do likewise. That's not what's being said at all. In fact, in the book of Acts, I think Paul was only there for a few weeks. It says he was only there for, 6 weeks, something like that. So I look at all the texts that I can find. Colossians 2 is an obvious one. Colossians 2:16 and 17. Therefore, let no one judge you in matters of food or festival or new moon or Sabbath day. These are but a shadow. The substance belongs to Christ. Well, having studied history, I took some literature classes, and if you read at all that, if you read at all any ancient Western literature, that shadow and substance language comes from Plato, fundamentally. And the idea is the physical thing in your hand is not real. Like this cell phone is not the true reality of what a cell phone is. It's a mere reflection of the idea of a cell phone. Like we all have this idea of what a cell phone is in our heads because somewhere out there in the world of the forms, there's this true reality, the substance, which is the actual reality that this thing reflects. And so what the biblical writers, Paul in particular, are really saying, if they say this is a shadow, that means this is just the reflection. It's a mere reflection of who Christ is. Christ is the substance. The ultimate reality is in Christ. John does the same thing with his gospel. In the beginning was the Word. The Logos is like the ultimate reality, the ultimate idea. Logic is one of our English words that comes from Logos. And for the world of Plato, to very greatly oversimplify, in Plato's allegory of the cave, it's the privilege of the philosopher to break out of the cave and crawl out from the world of the shadows into the world of the forms and go pursue that ultimate reality. But what the biblical writers do is they flip that world on its head, and they say, like in the Gospel of John, the Word became flesh, the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us. If you're familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave,
Yes.
We're stuck in this world of shadows that we can't really see anything true. We don't know anything. But the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth comes in, becomes like one of us, and dwells among us. It's just an amazing thing to me to think about how different the gospel of Jesus Christ is from anything else that's out there. All worldly religions have one thing in common, and that's that you must do something to please some deity, the universe, something. But the gospel of Jesus Christ is that the ultimate reality himself, the creator of heaven and earth and king and lord of heaven and earth, came down, became like one of us, took our sin and sinfulness onto himself at the cross, died and rose again, that he can give us eternal life and give us his inheritance. And it's nothing we do. All he asks us to do is trust him, that he is who he says he is, and he will do what he said he will do.
Mm. Can you tease apart some of, like Moto Sapien raises a good point, that what he's meaning is that if you drink bleach, there will be a price to pay. God won't punish me for it. It just carries its own consequences. I kind of view that as they're the laws of nature. What we're talking about is a law of salvation and supernatural nature, and is a totally separate thing. It's same as I've always said, playing the guitar. I can love it. Yeah, sure. If I play certain notes, they're going to sound discordant and be unpleasing to the ear. That's just a natural law. But my love of playing the guitar and trying to, achieve some sort of sanctification through that is separate to the consequences one must pay for breaking nature's laws. And Motor Sapien adds, what verse do I find this supernatural law? I don't think it's a verse. I'm just suggesting that the atonement of the cross and the symbol of, as Christians believe, that Jesus was a pure sacrifice to atone for the earth's sins, is about that once for all time completed adjudication. And yes, the natural laws have always prevailed before and since, and they are separate. And so if Christ is making, or Paul certainly claims on Jesus' behalf, that there are supernatural elements, for example, the road to Damascus, then you're entering into two spheres. One is of a supernatural nature and going to heaven, the idea of being saved, and what must I do to be saved, to get to this supernatural realm? I'm sure there's plenty of verses that can be found there, Motor Sapien, that speak of this supernatural law traversing from the earth into heaven. How do we get from one to the other? And I'm suggesting that the whole gospel point of the cross and the atonement is saying that, hey, you don't have to be doing these things. Yes, you will do things and you'll fall and stub your toe, and if you drink your bleach, there's going to be consequences. If you hurt someone, if you kill someone, if you lie to people, if you do all of these things, there's consequences, but they are separated from this transition into the afterlife, this supernatural realm that Christians preach and teach about. And I think we need to tease apart this notion that, for me, God has anything to do with that. He set in motion this science, this nature, this physical realm, physiology, physics, cause and response, that has nothing to do with getting into heaven. Now, that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts there, Ray, to help clarify that?
I'm certainly no expert. I'm certainly no expert on this, but I know the medieval philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas wrote about this quite extensively in his books. But he conceived of God as among other things, the great lawgiver. And so from Aquinas comes this idea that, and really actually from the Apostle Paul and the Bible, that God has ordained not only his moral commandments and moral standards, but also the laws of nature, our laws of our particular government, wherever we happen to live. For Paul's day, that's Rome. For our day, that's me, the United States, and you, you, Australia. And God has ordained all of these things, and he has ordained all of these things for our good. And you're right, there are different categories. There are different categories that serve different purposes. Like the law of gravity see what's it, the law of gravity isn't some moral thing. It's just the
Yeah.
reality of the world in which we live.
Yeah.
If I
It's the physics.
have a hammer and I drop it on my toe is going to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the natural order.
Yeah.
With civil government, if we violate the law, we can face legal consequences.
Yeah.
If we do something immoral, we can face divine consequences. The whole point of the gospel is that Jesus took that eternal punishment onto himself so that we didn't have to take it. And, somebody was saying, let's get it out. I don't like the legal analogies, but that's what the New Testament analogy is an adjudication of righteousness called justification. And yeah, it's not true justice on us in the sense of we're getting what we deserve, because that's what biblical justice is. It's grace. But yet justice is satisfied because the wrath of God was poured out on sin at the cross.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. It really is. I'm guilty of this sometimes, but I think sometimes Christians, we forget that these concepts are hard and they're complex, and it's okay that we don't fully understand it because we're talking about an infinite Savior. You and I, we're finite human beings, but Jesus is God, and God is not bound by the same laws of physics that we are because he created them. He's outside of them.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us. In fact, it's truly impossible for us to truly
again pointing
that
clearly to a supernatural. Like if you're a Christian, you must take on board that notion if you're the kind of Pauline Christian that most people are.
Right.
I'm interested in your thoughts again on what Motor Sapien says here, because I'm imagining he's really enjoying this conversation. Are you, Motor Sapien? Because having a lawyer on to kind of help us with some of these concepts, I think, is very refreshing. Peter, how does that make any sense, though, what I just said earlier? Is this supernatural law the way you run your household and raise your girls? So I didn't say it was a supernatural law. I said it was a supernatural realm that's almost beyond the law, as Ray was just saying. I don't let this, again, me personally, shouldn't God be righteous and sensible? So if I don't run my household based on the supernatural laws, other than the soothing balm that descends upon me in the sense of anxiousness being gone, and a sense of feeling emotional stability and peace and contentment that come from some of my beliefs. But the household, runs, I guess that has a trickle down effect, that sense of peace and contentment. My girls squabble, but we all have problems and fight. There's laws of nature that apply. I think you added there, and this is where I'm interested in your thoughts, Ray. It comes down to, is God delving out imposed penalty? I'm suggesting that he's not. If you jump off a roof, you will fall and hurt yourself because of the law of gravity. That's a natural law that God isn't delving out. It's already set into motion. There's the laws of the actual physical nature, science, that I'm a little bit of a deist in some ways. They were set in motion, and then you got to live in that and do with it what you can. But to kind of get some sense of hope, you look up to the stars and the sun, and you receive the warmth and a bit of guidance and a sense of contentment and peace, that and a hope. But you still have to live amongst all the nature. Can you explain that better for me, Ray?
Yeah, I think so. Let me rephrase that. I'll take a stab at it. Well, we are kind of getting back to what God has ordained for our good. Again, I'm not an expert, but this is what I understand from years of schooling Aquinas to be saying, right? God by nature is good. He is goodness itself. And he wants to give us good things. He's he's the Father, right? God the Father is love. God is love. He wants to give
love.
us good things. And in the same way that God has instituted, he set the universe in motion, yes. I believe he also sustains them. A little less, deist, so to speak, in that way. But, Modo Sapien, you use the example of Peter's family. And Peter, you started talking about all these good things that you want for your family, like peace, security, stability, joy, some of those things. God, being the ultimately good Father, wants to give you and your daughters good things. And to that end, God has ordained this natural order. Yes, the laws of physics in the universe that we talked about before, the laws of government, the state, that's Romans chapter 13, but also the family. He has set you over your household to give those things to your daughters because he loves them so much that he wants you to give that to your children. The same peace and stability and joy that you seek in your life. He has ordained that you are there to provide for those, provide those things to your children as well. So it's, I'm not sure if that fully answers Modo Sapiens' question, but the idea is that these are different realms: moral laws, civil laws, laws of physics, laws of nature. Those are different categories, but they are all fundamentally rooted in the goodness and love of God for our benefit.
And I think too, where I may differ from a lot of people in this group or watching is, and Modo Sapien, this might help you understand me at where I am at the moment, not where I'm hoping to be, but I don't view God as an interventional God as much as a lot of Christians do. So this, and I agree with you, Ray, this passing down of, hey, I want peace, contentment, love, passed on to my daughters, to my family. I then also see that as a shining North Star, a guiding light, a sense of a feeling even that God is love. What's love? What does it mean? If God is love, what does that mean? And I love my daughters. I've seen that picture of you and your wife and your baby. When was that taken?
That was, oh my goodness, that was a year ago.
Yeah. And your face is just, same with your wife, just shining. And that kind of love that's almost indescribable. I want that to be my guiding light, and how I feel about my daughters, I want that to be magnified. But a lot of the getting on with life and the gravity and putting a roof over their heads and providing food and overseeing the many things that we have to in life just to survive. I see a lot of that as a certain amount of responsibility and discipline that can seem in some ways opposite to the gospel. That's the work, that's the progress, that's the stuff that does have to happen. And I slip and I fall and I fail and I rise up and I move forward and I continue on with all of those things that come into play. But in the back of my mind, that North Star, the buckets were cut. I was lifted into the boat. I love your analogy there. And and there's someone else rowing me to this horizon, to this beautiful, sunny utopian dream that is a North Star. They're the things that buoy me up and give me a bit of energy to still carry on with all the other stuff that I have to do. But the stuff I have to do, is not the thing that got the buckets tied and me pulled into the boat and gives me this sense of peace and love and contentment where I go to sleep happy every night. That adjudicating kind of God, dishing out punishments for things done or not done. I don't believe in that kind of a God. Yeah, there's some thoughts there.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Just going back a little bit to my own experience, I by 2020 I've kind of fully come around to Adventism is not only wrong and flawed, but is contradictory to the gospel. And then COVID hits, and that was an experience for everybody.
Yeah.
But the good thing that came out of it for me personally, the silver lining, if you will, is that I had some time on my hands, which wasn't in itself a great thing, but I had some time on my hands to really buckle down and decide, okay, I want to be a lawyer. I want to pursue this. And up to that point, just in terms of my now legal career, I'd really only, the first step to law school is you get a 4-year degree in the U.S. The second step is you take the law school admissions test, the LSAT. And I had taken it twice prior to 2020, didn't really put the necessary effort into taking that at the time for reasons that really aren't important here, but I just didn't have the time to put into it, and I did okay. And I did okay, but not good enough to get into a decent law school. And so in 2020, I really buckled down on that and focused in, and I took it a third time, and I did well. And I got a scholarship to the University of Nebraska College of Law, and I came out here back to Lincoln again in 2020 for law school. And while in law school, I got connected with what I still think was a great experience for me, a church, an Adventist church, because I was still Adventist at this time, even though ideologically I differentiated myself from it. I was still a member. So I started going to this local church here in Lincoln that was still gathering, while simultaneously going to law school. And one of the best experiences in my faith journey was being part of the student group called the Christian Legal Society. And the Christian Legal Society is for lawyers and law students both. Any Christian, anyone can join, but there is a doctrinal statement for the Christian Legal Society. Very mainline Christian. You can be Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox or Protestant and be in it. And that was such a great experience because I got to interact with not only thoughtful Christians generally, but thoughtful Christians who were from Anglican and or Presbyterian backgrounds, and from Lutheran backgrounds, and from Catholic backgrounds, and from just different evangelical groups, some non-denominational, some denominationally affiliated. But it was really fun to talk through the issues and hear how, we kind of have differences and differences that matter, but on the very, very core ideas that gospel messaging, we were one body. Despite all these denominational differences, we were still one body in Christ. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to get together and study the Word and learn about God's Word with other people from other perspectives. And I've truly appreciated that. But anyway, during law school, I have a friend here in town who I meet with. I won't get into much of that, but we meet pretty regularly, and I was able to talk things out about my disagreements with Adventism, and this person definitely agreed with me. And it's been so nice having that personal connection with somebody who gets it too. It was clear to me that there were contradictions between what I understand the Bible to be saying, and I am definitely still learning. We're all still learning, right? I mean, this is God's word. It's immeasurably deep. But I did understand that there are some real contradictions, not only at secondary and tertiary levels, but at the gospel level. And part of the reason I speak so highly of this local church, Adventist church, that I was a part of, is there were multiple people within this local church that really understand the gospel. And I do think a lot of individual Adventists do understand the gospel. I really do. It's the institution and the official teachings that really cut against things. Anyway, so I understood there were these contradictions, but going to school, and at the time I was single, I was okay with the contradiction, frankly.
Yeah.
And eventually I met my wife, and we got married, had our little girl. And that really started to gnaw at me, because positive though my experience largely was, I still can think back to really, really impactful moments where somebody's rank legalism was just thrown in my face at me.
Yeah.
And how hard that was. And while there's no perfect, and that's not at all true of the church here in Lincoln that I'm talking about, but my churches in Michigan and Minnesota were often like this, where somebody just had these absurd standards that they held us to as kids, and how hard that was at times. And I don't want my daughter to have to live through that. There's no perfect church. There's no perfect group of people. That's absolutely true. But I don't want her to have those burdens put on her.
Yes, yeah. Isn't it interesting how that can shift, having a little one come into your life? Yeah. And I'm the same. I want to minimize. There's enough burdens as there is.
Yeah. It, like you say, there's life. There's all these things we have to do, and things we have to navigate, and
that
that's
just
life.
require discipline,
Yes.
And they have a cause and effect. You don't do it, this will happen, and it's not good. And the judgment is here for the earth. It's not for salvation, fortunately, but it's certainly here for the earth. We have to face. We judge ourselves, we judge others, we judge our situations.
Well, and
that's why
theologically speaking,
that's why it's a relief to think, okay, if you grasp the gospel, the adjudication, you're liberated from that at a level. That's what I was trying to say before, the supernatural level, but I'm meaning even more philosophically. You're liberated from a big picture to achieve divine connection. You must follow these certain steps.
Yeah, and going back to my study of the Sabbath, it's not just that I found that Christians have a good faith reason to disagree. It's this whole idea that the Sabbath is the mark of the remnant identity and seal of God at the end times.
Yeah.
It's patently absurd.
I know. It's just so clearly not part of the Bible narrative.
No, not at all.
It's not even part of the Pharisee narrative. It's a whole unique extra little button to push. Let's see, of all the confusion buttons we can have, let's add this one.
Yeah.
The seal of God.
One of those little cracks that started slipping in that I didn't recognize at the time, but now can see looking back on them, is in about 2019, I was living at home with my parents in Michigan. It may have even been earlier than that. I think it was earlier than that. I think it was probably, no, this had to be 2016. This was the spring of 2016. And my church in Michigan, where we were at the time, was doing part of this statewide prophecy seminar series. You know, the Ye Old Adventist Revelation seminar. And my dad and I were talking about this Christian couple that had been coming. They were older, you know, they had kids and adult children and grandchildren. But they were from I think a Methodist background or something. And they were coming to this Revelation seminar to learn more about the book of Revelation, I assume. And they stopped coming when the pastor got to the Sabbath talk. And I remember we had, in the background, been praying as a church that people would be receptive to the Sabbath truth and the Sabbath message. And at the time, something just didn't sit well with me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then my dad and I had this conversation about why Christians stop coming to our seminars when we get to the Sabbath. They're okay with most of the stuff right up until that point, and then they stop. They stopped coming, and I said in this conversation, I said to my dad that, you know, we may not believe that we're saved by keeping the Sabbath, or that we need to keep the Sabbath in order to be saved. We don't say that. But regardless of how much we say we don't believe that, when we talk about the Sabbath being the seal of God, that's what people inevitably hear.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't realize it, but that's what they inevitably hear, because that's what we're actually saying, even though we say we're not saying that. It's this sort of vicious contradiction, because if you really think about it, if the seal of God is indeed Sabbath observance for at least some people, that means unequivocally you're saying that for some people their salvation is contingent upon keeping the works of the law. Keeping Sabbath is a work of the Old Covenant law. There's no question.
Yeah.
And if you have to keep the Sabbath in order to get the seal of God, then you have to have the Sabbath in order to have final justification before God at the end of time. And that's what makes it a cursed gospel.
Boy, that's very good. Say that again. That's really good.
The part about Sabbath and the seal?
Yeah, and how that it ties you into, at some point, having to do something to get into heaven, and that is a false gospel. Just re-say that.
If the Sabbath is the seal of God, then at least some people at the end of time are going to have to keep the Sabbath in order to receive their final justification, their final salvation. And that's the exact thing that the apostles warned against.
Yeah.
By the faith of the law, no flesh is justified, or by the works of the law, no flesh is justified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's certainly, because a lot of the progressives can say, well, for now, I'm living this life. She's pastoral. I'm doing away with that in 44 as the IJ. I'm breathing the gospel into the church, and many say I understand the gospel. But at some point, if you're a progressive Adventist, you have to deal with this notion that Adventists' whole reason for being is to bring you to a point where you have to vindicate God. The Sabbath is the seal of God. What do you do with that? So sure, you can travel along until the Sunday law comes in, or whatever little hybrid version they have of that nowadays, justification for it. At some point, you have to go. The Sabbath is not just a nice, fluffy, tree-hugging day of haystacks and happy Sabbaths. At some point, Adventism teaches it will be a test of your salvation. So whether it is or not now, what are they going to do then? When these guys who are reclaiming Ellen as a nice, warm, fussy, inspirational writer and person who started churches and an organization that has health institutions, all great things, but the end game is standing without a mediator, keeping the Sabbath as a test to get into heaven or not.
And all of that's in the great controversy.
When that happens.
And all of that's in the great controversy, the book. And even if you subscribe to a sort of hierarchy of Ellen White's writings, where it's like the Conflict of the Ages series, and then the testimonies, and then sort of everything else that she wrote in that order. Well, I mean, there's no higher authority from Ellen White than her book, The Great Controversy.
Exactly.
And she claimed that God gave her that book, that God told her what to write in that book. And she writes the IJ, the last generation, sinless perfection, and keeping the Sabbath as the seal of God, all in those, what is it, like 3 chapters?
That's right. And so, those who say, hey, that's not my Adventism. Okay, well, if it's not your Adventism, what is your Adventism? Because you've just done away with the end game reason for being of Adventism. If that's not your Adventism, you've just created something completely different to Adventism. We'll have to close soon. Moto Sapien has said, Ray, it sounds like you, and I don't think you would agree with this, it sounds like you shared the experience of oppressive Adventism so many here have. I'd highly recommend the book, Can God Be Trusted? The author did a series that revolutionized my view of God. And I'm not saying that Moto Sapien doesn't have a great view and a great gospel understanding, and Maxwell wrote that book, I'm assuming, Moto Sapien. And I wish I'd come across Maxwell's stuff when I was an Adventist. I'd never heard of him until Moto Sapien.
Mervyn Maxwell?
Not Maxwell that wrote the children's stories, the other one. Mental blank, Moto Sapien, please write it in the comments. But we're kind of saying that you can have had an oppressive Adventism, you can have had the most blissed out, amazing Des Ford style gospel Adventism, you could have had no complaints at all but just lots of happy Sabbaths and tree hugging. Jesus is the answer. Tree hugging haystacks Adventism, that's not my Adventism. You can have had all of that, or the oppressive, but any way you slice it, you've still had the Adventism that says one day you must stand without an intercessor, you must keep the Sabbath, it will become a test of salvation. And you must realize that Ellen White claims some things in vision that didn't occur and aren't true. So whether you've been oppressed or whether you've had the most blissful kind of Adventism, being an Adventist, you are still putting your name to the end game. And if you say that's not my Adventism, well, that's a total different ball game, because this is a specific end game, sales funnel, down to a point, vindicating God, proving Satan's claim that you can't keep the commandments being a false claim. What do you do with that? Because at some point, no matter what kind of Adventist you are, your church teaches something that can never be changed, or it is totally not going to be the Adventism it was called to be.
And that's why I had to take my name off the books, because I'll just make this last point, if that's okay. I got to the point where I finally had to take my name off. Not because of any animus or disagreement or anything to do with anybody, in this local church I was going to, this Adventist church I was going to here in Lincoln. Nothing to do with anybody there. I just, understanding what Adventism teaches, what Adventism is, and what the Bible actually says, I couldn't put my name to that anymore. In Galatians chapter 4, Paul analogizes the Old Covenant and the New Covenant to two women from the book of Genesis. Hagar is the covenant from Sinai. Sarah is the Jerusalem above. He says Hagar, Sinai, the Sinaitic covenant, corresponds to present-day Jerusalem in his day, but the Jerusalem above is free. What does the scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. Because the Jerusalem above, that's free, that's our mother. What Paul is analogizing there is we're heirs according to God's promise. In the same way that God promised the son through Sarah, Isaac, we are heirs according to that promise. Those Judaizers that were trying to impose circumcision on the first century church it was not limited to circumcision. It was, Paul in another part of Galatians says, if you submit to circumcision, you're obligating yourself to keep the entire law. Acts 15 makes it very clear. It's circumcision and the law of Moses, not just faith in Christ. That's the issue. Was it faith in Christ alone, or was it faith plus the law as a whole? The law is one monolithic body of commandments. It is not separable into categories in biblical thinking. Anyway, so the Jerusalem above is free. In ancient times, if you were the son of a slave, you were a slave. If you were the son of a freeborn man and woman, you were a free man or free woman. Sarah was a free woman. Hagar was a slave woman. Ishmael, the son born according to the flesh, persecuted and tormented Isaac in Genesis. We can read about that in Genesis. The Judaizers were doing the same thing to the Christians in the region of Galatia and other parts of the first century church. Paul is not saying we rip out our Torah, our 5 books of Moses out of our Bibles and quit reading them. What he is saying is that Sarah recognized that Ishmael's presence was a threat to her son Isaac's inheritance. Ishmael could try to kill Isaac, hurt Isaac in some way, do away with him in some way to take the inheritance for himself. Even if he doesn't do any of that, he's going to have a claim on the inheritance when Abraham dies. And so what does the scripture say? Paul quotes Genesis, cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. The Judaizers in Paul's day were a threat to the inheritance of the believer. And Paul is saying you need to get those people out because they are a threat to your inheritance. They are trying to steal your inheritance away from you. Your inheritance is based on promise. They're trying to steal it away from you by placing you under law. You are not under the law. You are sons of the free woman, not the slave woman. And if you are a Seventh-day Adventist, please hear me. Ellen White is the proverbial slave woman, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church is her son. Cast out the slave woman and her son. They are trying to put you under the burden of the law and take away your freedom you have in Christ.
Wow. Mate, that's powerful stuff there. I think that kind of wraps up the conversation for today. That last 5 minutes there really sums up your journey and why you've left the church and why you speak into the community offering some support and advice there. Is there any sort of last thoughts you'd like to have in closing for today? And I'd love you back again. There's lots of topics that I would love to chat with you about. Like just pick a topic, for example, Ellen White's use of alcoholic cider, there's lots of indication that she was a little bit addicted to it. I'd love to pick some topics like that and just have you come on as a commentator and give some thoughts and ideas about it.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
Yeah.
We've delved a little bit more into theology tonight than I think we were planning on, but that's fun. I'm all for that.
Yeah. No,
So it's always fun, and I'd love to come back and we can pick a topic and rabbit trail away.
Yeah, I love it. And I want to thank everybody for their comments today. There's been some really good discussion. I was just chatting. I sent a message to Stephen Beagles and Frank Merendino. If you're still watching, you both, I'd love to have a conversation with the two of you on the program at the same time. And Ray, I'd love a conversation with you and Moto Sapien on the show at the same time. I think there's lots of common ground there, and I think you'd have a really interesting conversation. So keep that in mind. Moto Sapien, you and Ray, how does that sound? I think it'd be wonderful. And
it sounds fun.
Yeah. And then Stephen Beagles and Frank Merendino, you guys would be great. Now, next week, I've got Carrie Nennick coming on the show, either the first interview or the second one of the week, which is Tuesday or Wednesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, or Wednesday and Thursday, Aussie, 11 a.m. So that's going to be exciting. And tomorrow, who knows what's going to happen? There's 3 different options coming up tomorrow. But we just keep the conversation going, and I really appreciate you coming on today. I've been looking forward to this. And let's make our next one a chat with you and Moto Sapien. I think some of the I can't quite grasp the questions of the penal nature and that I know Moto Sapien is raising. So I'm a little bit inadequate to answer some of his questions, but I think the two of you could really nut out some stuff there. So
sounds fun.
Yeah. So my mind is full and racing, but we'll leave it there for today, and we'll look forward to catching you again soon. And thank you, everyone. We will see you all next time.